There was one occasion when you were going to do a display flight, some aerobatics, at a former girlfriend's wedding. That turned out to be a bit too exciting, I think.
It turned out rather badly. The background is worth saying that I was the one pilot selected to represent Britain in a championship in Australia, not one of the world championships, it was separate, and they had a dozen pilots from different countries. And they transported our aircraft out there, and then part of the deal was they bring them back again. And so I disassembled my plane, and in those days the plane I had, which I made myself, called a Pace Spirit, you had a single piece wing from tip to tip, and you remove various things, and you could remove the whole wing. And then we then got from the airline a big aluminium pallet, the size of this room here. And so the fuselage sat on it, and then next to it was the wing, supported on cradles. And one thing that I do totally meticulously, and I think any aerobatic pilot would do that, is that you have a instrument measuring G-forces.
Yes.
And so after every flight, you make a note of your G-forces in the flight, and you zero the instrument for the next flight. Anyway, it was into a Lufthansa 747 combi, so the plane was underneath me. And I'd arranged with a friend, Walter Extra, who became a very successful aircraft designer. But I'd met him again as a pilot. He was in the German team, and so we met and got on well. And so he then met me at Lufthansa at Frankfurt Airport, and we got the plane into a Lufthansa hangar to assemble it. And I saw that the G meter was on 6.5 G, and whereas in a 747 you might get 1.5 G, the absolute maximum. So we felt sure there was the whole pallet had been dropped.
Really?
But we looked inside. He had a thing called a boroscope, so you can look inside a structure. But there weren't that many. It's a one-piece wing, and there weren't that many inspection holes. We couldn't see any problem, and in the end, it sort of seemed to be okay. And of course, I was a bit more gung ho in those days, and so I did a few test flights and then brought it back to England. And then 10 days later, I was doing for a former girlfriend who was getting married. She said, would I do a display? So I did, and I came in at high speed, and as I pulled up, everything in front of the left-hand port main spar fell off. So basically I was left with the rear two-thirds of the wing, and it doesn't fly very well. Unfortunately, I'd done one parachute jump, and I'd practiced quite a lot of getting out of the aeroplane. But of course, these planes don't have ejector seats, and it is up to you to be out of the plane. And the view was you need to be clear of the aircraft at 1,000 feet. And part of the problem was that the pitot tube, which is the air pressure measuring device, was on the bit of wing that disappeared. And so, but
I'll just interrupt you. The reason I think you need to be at 1,000 feet is to give time for the parachute to open.
No, because you have to open the canopy, undo 7 seat belts, undo your radio, and then get out of the aeroplane, and then open your parachute.
But you still need a certain height, I suppose.
Yes, but you need to be clear of the plane at 1,000 foot.
Yes.
And I estimated just from experience that I was at about 800 foot. And so I thought, and it had a very powerful engine, so I had a degree of control, but not a great deal. And I ended up at sort of 130 miles an hour, inverted at about 20 foot, just over open country, fortunately. And I tried to roll the right way up, and the wing caught the ground, and I stopped from that speed in about 50 foot. And so the Farnborough estimated it at 60 G, which is sort of barely... yes, it's on the borderline of modern racing cars, because they're better supported and they have crush zones and things like that. People have survived bigger. But anyway, so I broke my legs in 9 places, my pelvis in 3, all my ribs, and then quite a lot of other injuries. I was very fortunate, I'm sure, because there was a young consultant at Ipswich General who was a pilot, quite a well-known glider pilot. And of course, you never want to have an accident on a Saturday, because none of the good people are there. They're playing golf or whatever. But he heard about this accident, and he immediately rushed to the hospital, got hold of the best anaesthetist and got the whole theatre waiting for me. So it took them about half an hour to get me out of the aeroplane, but then I went straight there, and I'm sure he saved my life. He was absolutely dedicated. Indeed, has become a personal friend. But so I was once I could, I left Ipswich, but after about I was in intensive care for a week, and then after about another 2 weeks, I said, please, can you get me to London, because I felt I could do something useful, and my friends were there, and so they agreed, and so they arranged me to go to Middlesex. So I was then out to Middlesex for another 2.5 months in one bed.
Gosh. The guests at that wedding got more than they expected.
Yes, indeed. Well, the husband, or the groom, I should say, I was always slightly suspicious of him, but he saw this and said, that bloody Goode, he's done this to mess up my wedding. As if, which, anyway, but it was a bit dramatic.
Gosh, yes.